Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. We're excited to lead this conversation. Thank you so much to Bild, B&H for having us, and to Nick for introducing us. We're going to talk we want to be really detail-oriented and talk specifically about our experiences through ushering or shepherding a short film from an idea through producing it, through getting it out into the festival circuit, and we want to get a sense of, what elements feel most interesting to you all. So what we'll do is we'll sort of talk for a little while. We'll open up a little bit early for questions, just in case there are really specific questions that we haven't hit on, because I want to make sure this is a useful conversation. And the whole time we're trying to think through how a short film, what are the decisions you're making that is honoring your vision, your storytelling integrity, while also trying to think about, well, I'm pursuing a career here. I have a dream of being a filmmaker. Maybe I have a dream of working at the feature length and finding financing behind a feature film. So I'm trying to make decisions that allow me to tell the stories that I want to tell, but also hopefully allow me to wind up in the spot that I want to wind up. And that's sort of the careful balance. So I want to start at the beginning with how do you come around to the idea for the short film that you want to make? How do you make a strategic decision, but also one that feels authentic to the stories you want to tell? Yeah, if you both could share with me like how you've come around to these film ideas. Oh, and I should mention this. So Kevin has a film. UC is Fishbones is playing at Palm Springs in like 2 weeks. Yeah. It world premiered at South by. Brit's film Tessitura that he co-directed with a filmmaker, Lydia Cornett, just won Mountain Film Festival a couple weeks ago and became Oscar qualified. And Brit has previously produced, yay! Brit has directed a lot of his own work and also previously produced a film called Rest Stop that won the best narrative short in Sundance in 2022. Three? So lots of experience up here and also lots of very recent experience with ushering a short through. So back to the question, how do you come around and sort of say, this is an idea that I should spend, the better part of a year, if not 2 years, ushering through?
I mean, I think that's the first thing is like, it has to be an idea, even though it's a short, it has to be something that is interesting to you outside of what production will look like. So I think that like the way I kind of think about projects is that I have, a super list of like random ideas. And then I think I look at that list and I go, what resources do I have at my disposal? What's the likelihood that I could actually sustain this for maybe 2 years? And then also, I think like what do I want to get out of it that is beyond getting into a festival or doing something else? So I view shorts as an opportunity to grow, to like develop your style and to really just figure out like how you want to make films. So for me, when I'm thinking about like a short that I want to pursue, I'm thinking, is there something I want to do later that this short could convince people that I actually know how to do that? So I mostly work in hybrid documentary where I'm fusing narrative elements with documentary, and I think that is a space where I often have to like explain to people like what it is I hope to make. So I think any opportunity where I can like try something out or like explore some other way of making, whether that's like I want to spend a lot of time with characters or I want to work with a new cinematographer, like there always has to be a learning goal, and then like and then I think a lot about like feasibility and about like if I can actually do it.
And does feasibility match with the idea of what the best result for the film could be, or do you ever find? Yeah, okay.
I think like I think that like it can be incredibly exhausting to like only focus on like the final result of like this film will get into a festival and then it's over. It's like that's actually not the case. It's really never over because you're building a body of work. So for me, when I'm thinking about feasibility, it's like, okay, what resources do I have access to? What people do I have who maybe might also be interested in this idea? How much money do I have? How much time do I have? And I think those are all things that help me figure out, like, okay, of this massive list of random ideas, what is actually worth like the time? And I guess we also were talking about this before, but the idea of like momentum, like also going where momentum might be, like if you're talking to a lot of people and they're like, that short idea sounds cool, it might be worth your time to like dig into that a little more. Yeah.
One thing that you said that I want to flag is the idea that a short feels more like it's part of a body of work.
Totally.
That you're introducing yourself, even though you're at that early career, early professional stage, people are taking you seriously as a filmmaker, and the shorts kind of are thought of as a collection that say, okay, I've seen these 3 shorts by Brit, and I have a sense of what he makes more expansively. And then if you want to pitch something longer, it's going to feel like one can look at the evidence of those short films and say, oh, it makes sense that he'd do well doing that bigger film.
And I think that could be like thematic, or that can be style based.
Totally.
Like there are so many things that can link a body of work. And I think a lot of what I've done in the more recent years is think about like, of the shorts I've made, how do they actually go together? Like what's the thread? Because I think that's the thing that determines like what you actually want to say as a filmmaker, and how you want to make film. So I think, it's all about like creating some form of like a thread, and hopefully there's like something that is guiding your filmmaking, whether it's an idea you want to explore, or a topic you want to like really get into, or even like a style you want to approach. Like there's probably a thread there, and I think the more you make shorts, and the more you sit with like, why did I make that? The more you can figure out like, what is that link between, and how can you create like consistency throughout the work?
Totally. Kevin?
I mean, to echo a lot of what Brit was saying there, the fact that if an idea sticks with you and kind of bugs you for like multiple months and like kind of sits under your skin in a way, it definitely seems like it's something that you should give attention to. But when I think about shorts, I'm always thinking about specificity and perspective. I'm always thinking about what is a story or a moment that I can highlight that only I can showcase, or only I can tell a story about. And I found that to be a really interesting kind of activation point for finding ideas that are both truthful, but also something that you're engaged with, and something that you'll be able to commit a lot of time to. Because if it's something that can be personal in that way and can have that weight of your perspective, you have to give time to it to have that story be told. And I think with my film, my most recent film, that I was thinking a lot about how to speak with my family, like how to talk to them about kind of issues that seemed difficult to breach across in like an immigrant family and an immigrant home. And I've discovered that I found casting my parents in my films, in my shorts, that kind of deal with some of these issues, has been an interesting way for us to talk about things outside of I don't know, like the trappings of real life in a way. So I found like I kind of approach it through that perspective of like, how do I start conversations like just with my family, and not even with an audience yet. And then from there, I kind of thought more about how does this film start a conversation with an audience at a festival, at a screening here while we're talking to each other. So I feel like it's the goal of a film. You definitely want it to help your career, but you also need to think about other goals that they can further yourself as a person and your own life, and that will give you the energy to continue making them in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and some of those storytelling choices that you've made, like collaborating with your parents and casting your parents as the roles of the parents of the main character, have become characteristics in your films in an ongoing way. So if you watch Kevin's body of work, you realize that one of the things that they do is incorporate and like real people and real family members into playing the cast. And then that becomes something that people are curious about moving forward. A question on when you come up with that specificity about sort of what you want to make, how does that factor into the references you have, or maybe the stylistic approaches to like how you want to execute that. Because the idea of casting a parent, for example, is sort of a process choice.
Yeah.
But then how do you then imagine visualizing that?
Right. Well, I think a lot about well, filmmaking is definitely a team sport, and the crew that surrounds you is so important. And I think I've been so lucky to have such great collaborators that share a similar vision and share this goal of kind of community-driven storytelling. So I think first surrounding yourself with people that have similar goals in that way, and then allowing them to be an actual part of your process. We think a lot about writer-directors and like kind of auteur-driven cinema, but if you're allowing your collaborators to be a bigger part of that storytelling process, I think there's ways that you can elevate your own voice and work together to heighten your work as well.
Totally. I want to move us into talking about the production phase, because I feel like when we start to produce a short, we've had all this time to incubate it as an individual, or if we're working with a co-writer, and then you produce a film, and it's almost like you've brought your kids, you send your kids to kindergarten, and suddenly they're like into Frozen, and you're like, I don't want my kid ever to be into Frozen, but I have no control because now they're amongst other people. So how do you find that your film project like evolves or expands when you move into the production process, and how, maybe for the audience, how to navigate being okay with that, because it can kind of grow in directions that might not be totally within your control, or you can command control, and then that can create bad vibes on set.
Yes. Or in a lot of ways, the movie can be about your own desire for control. I think so much of I've learned recently that I'm very much like, I think in like an essay format. And I don't necessarily, when I'm thinking of an idea, see a lot of like clear images or things like that. Like I know that's not where my expertise lies. So for me, the idea of like collaborating with people is the actual like, this is what's gonna be a film. Like I actually can only bring one part into this process, and everyone else kind of is a collaborator with me in making it a reality. So I work with a co-director a lot who's more of a narrative scripted filmmaker named Noah Seamus, and I think they have such a command of like visual language. Like a conversation we're always having is, yes, but what do we see when we are talking about this certain thing? So yeah, I think like for me, I kind of even go into the production process being like, it's already gone. Like the control is already let go, because I do think like as soon as other people are in the room, or actors or interview subjects, like they're gonna bring their own thing to it, and actually like that's what's exciting. And I think I have like completely leaned into like having very little control. But I think like in giving up control on set, I know that like when I'm in pre-production or when I'm bringing people on, like what's really important to me is like continuing to like say, like to express what I hope the vision is, to try to get people like on the same page. So it's not like you show up on set and like everyone's kind of doing their own thing. It's like we all have a guiding principle. This is what we're gonna continue to think about and return. Individuals can take whatever directions they might take, but here's our North Star. So yeah, I'm very much like, no control. How can you control if you're not doing everything yourself?
Kevin, how controlling are you?
I mean, I think I'm working on letting go of control. I think that's a big part of my growth as a filmmaker. But yeah, I think of like when you're directing a film, you're a leader, but you're also more of kind of like a guide. You're just trying to like steer the film in the right direction, and there's so many moving parts. There's so many choices that have to be made in a day. I think I've heard this quote that like if you can make 75% right choices on a film set, then you have a good film. If you make 80% right choices, it's like you have a stellar film. 85%, it's like okay, you're winning an Oscar. So yeah, it's you're set. But yeah, I mean like. I think also like you're guiding your fellow crew members, but you're also they're kind of opening you up to different possibilities. Like I just made a film that takes place in a sub-basement apartment in Queens, and there is a scene where there is a very small flood, like 1 or 2 inches. And I think when I was writing it, I think a lot about producibility when I'm writing something, and I'm like, this is gonna be impossible to do. And then upon meeting with my production designer, who's Jacqueline Goldstein, who's this, she does a lot of music videos, and she's done like some really big set builds. She was showing me the possibilities of how we can make this happen practically and safely and without spending thousands of dollars. And I think it allowed me to write with more freedom because of this collaboration. It allowed me to tell the story with more freedom. Yeah.
I think something that we don't realize is happening already when we're working in shorts production is that we're building these collaborations that will be ongoing. And coming off of a set recently that was for a feature, I was amazed to realize that at the feature level, when somebody is, the elevation that you often see when somebody makes their first feature is, yes, them evolving as a filmmaker, but it's really the fact that they're bringing in these incredibly talented artists as department heads who are storytellers in their own right, and that kind of like exponentially grows the possibility for the film. So can you talk a little bit about picking those collaborators and knowing when to hold on to them and understanding this idea of kind of building an ensemble that perhaps you have a production designer who is the person that needs to work with you in order to achieve a Kevin film, period. You know, and then like if I were to swap that out, then suddenly some of my language goes away. So I'm just interested in how you sort of think through building those relationships.
Oh, I can. Do you want
Go
to
first. I can go first.
Well, I think filmmaking is very stressful. It's a very intensive process. So I think something that's helpful is if it's somebody that you can trust just outside of the filmmaking world, like somebody that you feel like you can spend a lot of time with and do a lot of problem solving with, that is hugely helpful. And then on top of that, I think, does this person's artistic values, do they align with me? Do we have similar taste in films and even in like in TV shows and music? Like, are we going to be drawn to the same kind of choices throughout the process? I think that's where I kind of start, like with our references. But then a big part of it, I think, is also just about kindness and being kind to your collaborators. And I work also as a cinematographer, and I've also worked as a loader and as an assistant camera, and I know that sometimes when you're in other crew positions, the work can feel less fulfilling, and kindness goes a long way throughout all the crew positions. And I think, I don't know, I think there's something important about building a set that feels generous and a crew that feels truly like a family, and that everyone can kind of help each other and rely on each other throughout the process.
I think in all of my shorts, I was like going back and thinking, but I think I've worked with a different cinematographer for every one of the shorts I've made. And I think that's not to say like, oh, I don't want to hold on to those crew members, but I do think there's, like in shorts, you kind of have the opportunity to try different things. Like I knew very early on that like, because I was like, oh, I'm not like thinking visually at all times, like constantly looking for that person that made what I felt like I didn't have feel really like easy and good. So I've been working with the same DP for now 3-ish projects. And it's been like just wonderful to know that like, I know how to translate like what I'm trying to say and trying to do, and to just know that there's someone there who like is essentially like, you know, taking in that information and translating it to visuals, which for me is a very like, that can be a very scary process, but it feels less scary when it's someone you know, you trust, you are like, I love your eye, I love what you're going for. So yeah, and I also think to what you were saying about like, there are some other roles that feel like less fulfilling, like having like bigger relationships, like I think like an AC I worked on a short is gonna be like a DP on another project. It's like people also wanna do other things and grow. So being a like person who's like, yeah, if you're gonna help me grow, I'm gonna help you grow as well. And I'm gonna, if I like working with you, then like, let's take a risk together. I think goes a long way in like building the kind of like long-term partnership. You sort of can't always be like taking, you know, and asking people. You also want to like give to them as well. So I think I try to work with a lot of the same people now because I'm like, okay, you were with me in 2018 doing this, and I want to give you like more of a responsibility on this if you want to do that and grow. Yeah.
Especially on shorts, I feel like, because it's not a lot of pay often, if any, and then I think also on shorts sometimes you can have like more experienced folks in different crew positions wanting to try other roles, and like it's an opportunity to learn and grow like throughout. Yeah.
Totally.
It's also like putting out there what you'd want to experience, because we, as you're saying, like on shorts, a lot of times the person who's running sound is directing a film in a month anyhow. Exactly. So there's like a reciprocity built into there, but there's also this idea of checking ego to recognize that like this person's doing this role on your set today, and they might not be living, off of this. They might not be a sound person in an ongoing way or a sustainable way, right? So it's sort of thinking through honoring who they are, so that we're all treating each other with that level of respect. I think beyond that, the reputation for a filmmaker builds at the shorts stage. And so pretty quickly, people start to know what it's like to work on one of your sets, and that you hold that culture. You are responsible for that culture. So if you are out the gate somebody who's anxiety-inducing or creates a bad culture on set, people pretty quickly are less interested in certainly working for you for less pay, but maybe just like working on your set in general. And you need that reputation to be in good shape if you want to move on to larger projects and with greater financing.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that the cinematographer I work with does a lot of commercial work, does a lot of narrative work, and is typically on like, sets that are 14-hour days and things like that. The way that I like to work is 6 hours, like nothing too crazy. And I think that it's helped a lot with like getting people that are way more experienced, because they're like, well, at least I know it won't be 14 hours. So I think like the way you run your set, the reputation you have of running your set can also attract people that otherwise might not be like, already in your network or already in your community. Like I do feel like I've been able to work with a lot of really, really amazing camera people because of the reputation that's carrying from one DP who was like, I really love that the sets are chill.
Sweet 6-hour day.
Oh, that's all you need sometimes.
It's also like recognizing that sometimes we think, I don't know, that our talent are operating on a slightly different echelon of how they make these decisions, but actors talk to actors as well. And so if you can be if your lead thinks that it was a really fulfilling experience, that they really enjoyed working with you, that they felt like the set had a good culture, you're going to open up the possibility to cast other recognizable talent later on. And it's not so much going to be about pitching your idea to them. A lot of it's going to have to do with the word of mouth of the actor that you previously worked with saying like, oh yeah, that's absolutely somebody who you want to be on set with. So you don't, it all kind of, yeah, the stone and the ripples, et cetera. I have a question about post in terms of like, this can happen in production as well, but when you're in post, how do you hold on to the idea of what the film is? And if you can share like an experience of where you see the film starting to maybe become something different, if that's the footage you have versus the idea that you had when you were writing it or kind of like envisioning it. So yeah, that moment in post when it might transform in a way that was unanticipated, and how you engage with it.
Well, I think about post as definitely almost like the second writing process of your short. I mean, you've written the script and you've shot the film, but post is really where you kind of make the choices that make the film what people see in festivals or online. And I think sometimes I try to do a cut that's like to the script, and then I work with Sean as an editor as well. And then Sean's really great about kind of having us throw away the script and just trying possibilities and seeing how scenes could play out differently in a narrative. And then I think a lot about like, we watch a lot of features and we think about story structure a lot of times in the long form, but shorts I think are very different, and they work best when they kind of focus on a core moment, or they're almost like poems. Like if a feature is like a short story or a novel, I think a short is like a poem. It has to have very specific voice, and it has to kind of grab you with its tone and its intention really quickly. So I think in post, that's kind of where you're shaping the choices that make your film stand out later on in its distribution process. Yeah.
So would you say that you sort of know the core idea of what the film was intended to be?
Yes.
And staying true to that, not necessarily
Not
true
necessarily
to
the
the script.
scripts, exactly. Yeah, knowing what your intentions with the idea are, even from that ideation stage, and then using that as your guide in post if you can. Yeah.
Yeah. I've also had an experience editing with Sean, and throwing away like a bit of the idea and actually sitting with the material that we actually have. The most recent film that I co-directed, Sean was a lovely consulting editor on, and I think like there was a moment where it felt like when we were shooting where I feel like we lost what the movie was about, and then in the edit we sort of found it again. And I think that does come with like knowing your North Star, but then also being like, I can let go of some things. Like, if this isn't how the film is actually working, like when I look at it, then it's okay to change things. Like, it's okay to make the movie about something else, maybe. Like, that is fine. I think in shorts, you also have that more of that flexibility to be like, okay, I thought the movie was gonna be about planes, but it's actually about pilots. And like, that's totally fine. And it's better to, I think, sit with the material you have than to like, continue to pretend that you have footage that you simply don't, which I think is like, I've been there before. So I think, I agree that like it is like a second writing process, and to me it feels like honestly a new version of the movie, especially as I feel like I'm very like pre-production, I'm in. Production, I feel like I'm like, oh, I don't know what's going on. And then post, I'm like, all right, I'm back in. I know what this movie is. And I think like, you just sort of have to like be open to maybe like making the movie that's in front of you rather than like an idea you might have had, a year ago.
Yeah.
Things change.
Yeah, and it's a process. Like, you are going to wind up in the editing room and think that you got the thing that you intended to shoot. It's hard to even get over production, which is like a harrowing, very difficult experience. You got no sleep, you're exhausted, hopefully all your relationships are intact, and now you have to like go in and be like, I love this footage, and I'm not gonna think of any of the memories that are attached to this footage. And so like, I think it's okay to go through a process of saying, okay, I'm kind of trying to make the initial thing. Here it might not be working, here it definitely is working. And then it's about responding to the footage that you're seeing and knowing that you might try something, ditch it, go through a bunch of other things and come back to it, knowing that it's the right choice later.
Totally.
And so it's about being able to kind of respond to what you have. I mean, you guys have heard it 1,000 times, but the sort of dinosaur skeleton metaphor is that it's there. The story's there. It's your job to uncover it. Yeah. So you see that the first scene, the fourth scene, the last scene, those all work. Those scenes in the middle, they're not quite there yet, but I can see that the leg and the tail and the skull, I can see where that is, so I can have a sense of what's between there. And I can learn from what's working to try to solve the riddles that are the scenes that aren't quite working. And so I think it takes time to do that, and it also takes a while to get used to the idea of what your film is going to be, what this new draft or version of the film is going to be versus what you originally set into writing with.
I was also just gonna say, sometimes it helps to have like other excavators in the other archaeologists. I don't know. I'm trying to do your metaphor.
Take the metaphor.
Because I do think like it is hard to say like, oh, my movie's in there somewhere. I can't really find it. Like, work with a consulting editor. Like, bring in someone else. Like, get fresh eyes on it. Because I do think like even people who are on set, they have a version of the movie in their mind. The actors everyone has a version of the movie in their mind, but someone who is like only responding to the material that you have in front of you is actually like an incredible resource to say like, here's what's actually interesting to me. This footage is quite interesting. And I think like, for example, like that's what you really provided for us and our team when we were working on the opera movie of like, I feel like you like found the opening, like you found all of these things that I think we just weren't really thinking about in that way because we were like, no, the movie's like this.
Totally.
But you do kind of need someone to say, what if it was like this? It's usually a good idea.
Yeah, especially if that person wasn't on set.
Yeah.
So if you can, I mean, if you're planning to edit your own film, maybe plan to co-edit it, and so that there's somebody next to you who can look at your footage more objectively than you when you're like, well, the intention of this was this. I was there that day and we got on the second take. Well, the second take doesn't work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and there's nothing we can do. But the third take's kind of great and something different happens and now we can go in a different direction. I do want to spend a little bit of time before getting to questions talking through getting your film out there. So getting your film into festivals, how you strategize, what festivals to submit to, and then maybe, you know, in an ideal world, finding distribution, or just making sure that this short film helps you get to that next step that you want to get to for your next project.
Well, I feel like there's kind of the standard rule, which can be broken, of course, but where you kind of submit to the top tier festivals first, and you're looking for that world premiere at like a Sundance or like a Berlin or South by Southwest or Toronto maybe. And then once you kind of make the festival schedule is it's kind of scheduled in a way where Sundance and the bigger festivals are at the top of the year. So if you know that you're not getting into some of these larger name festivals, you can start to reach out to other festivals that you really love and also might be even better champions of your work. Black Star is an incredible festival that Brit has played at, and they are known to really champion folks' work. Lots of regional festivals are amazing, and I think thinking about where your film, what kind of audience you want your film to have, if there's a cultural community that you want to reach out to, that you want to start conversations with, there are lots of festivals that kind of cater to that intentionality. And yeah, there's a lot more than those name festivals, but the standard is kind of start there and then to move forward in the year and see where your premiere lands, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And there's top tier festivals sort of happening throughout the year, but the reason why Sundance is often in the forefront is because if you submit by usually August for their deadline, you kind of start the year cycle in a way where you're like, okay, like it's incredibly hard to get into Sundance, but at least I'll know I didn't get into Sundance before I select another festival, because it's really hard, and I would actually generally warn against it. If somebody invites you to a festival and you're like, I'm waiting on Sundance. Like, somebody wants you to come to their festival and screen. They care about your work. They want to support your career. It's much better to go to the person who's saying, come on in, than to wait for the person who might not invite you to their party, right? So I think thinking about your strategy a little bit timeline-wise is helpful. And then leading into like, where are people excited about my work? Because it's a longevity game. You know, you could get supported by 3 or 4 regional festivals off of your first professional short, and that's the thing that's going to make people anticipate your next film, and maybe that next short is the one that hits those top tier festivals. Only trying to hit a home run like on the first pitch, sports analogies, can like set you up to just be continuously disappointed, and it can set you up to devalue festivals that are deeply, in some cases, as somebody who has like premiered a festival at Sundance and been unable to buy a drink to even celebrate that film afterwards because everything was a private party and we're eating like Little League pizza and saying we did it. It can be really nice to be in a place where people are championing shorts filmmakers, or you're just a bit of a bigger fish in a smaller pond in order to build that kind of reputation and regard for your work.
I just think about the first festival I was accepted to was a festival here in New York called New Fest. I remember sitting across from you when I got that acceptance, and that acceptance is much later. Like, I think their festival's in October. So I had been rejected, and I was like talking to you saying like, I don't think anybody wants this movie. And I finally got that invite, and it was from a queer festival in New York, meaning I could go with my community, I could go with my friends, and that festival ended up being like an amazing launching point for my entire career. Like, I know that my second short is on HBO Max because of that festival, because they made that introduction, and they can do that because it's a smaller festival. So I really am like, I don't know. I think that like what I learned very early on was like, go where you are celebrated, go where you're wanted, because those people are actually going to be your champions and your advocates. I also think it's really important to be at festivals. So not every festival, but if you get into a festival and it is within your means to go, you should go. I try to not like apply to a lot of festivals that I know I cannot attend. So I'm probably not applying to like festivals in other countries where they don't provide travel, because I think the value is actually meeting programmers, meeting people who are there, and being able to like build your network on the ground. So yeah, I'm all for like regional, thematic, community-based festivals, because those are going to be your people, and those will help you maybe get to the other festivals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's, so when going to a festival, it's relationship building. It is good for you to know what you're working on next when you attend a festival. You don't have to go in with your feature script if you are not ready to make a feature. It does take a while to be ready to make a feature, so maybe don't try to like, jump the shark to get there, but have a sense of, what you might be working on, and if you're many directors, as they don't want to be in front of the camera, are introverts and might not like to put themselves out there that way, but when you're at the festival, know that this is the space for that, and you want to meet a programmer, especially since programming is part-time work, and so somebody who's programming at Palm Springs Short Fest is probably also programming for Sundance the next year. Yeah. If they like your film that they just programmed this time, they might like your next film, and that might be perfectly set up for them to look at it at Sundance, for example. The other tip I would give for festivals is always like sort of the golden question is what are you working on? And ask that question, because it would be really, really rude for somebody not to ask that question after you ask them the question. So it's a nice way to be curious and to like be meeting people and listening to other folks, but it's also almost like a better way than like for folks who have been to festivals know that you can get overwhelmed by people being like, hey, Kevin, can I tell you about my film? And you're just like, I guess so. I'd also like to meet you as a human. And so how can you, move through those spaces where we were talking about your reputation as a filmmaker and what people say about you on your set, thinking about that also as like your reputation when you're meeting other folks in the industry and making sure that they feel like they're, folks are more excited to support a generous, kind, person who they're excited about their work. I want to shift us, if we can, Casey, into answering some questions that folks might have, just to make sure we're not like navigating around things that you're actually curious about, and answer questions. So if anybody has a question, if that wasn't too quick of a cutting of the wheel to ask, we'd be happy to talk through anything you're curious about. Yeah, so the question is, do you need to find a producer or a team or maybe a financier to help you make your film? I'll start, and maybe, I think it's important to think, if you're building up that body of work and this is your first film and you're just trying to explore that, and it might not be the first film because you made some in college, but if it's your first film that you're trying to get into maybe a festival space, I think it's okay to say, all right, I have $1,000 and 2 friends and a room. And what can I do with that? I think it's what you want to do is make something that probably shows enough exciting potential or like shows a little bit about what your voice is so that the next time you're able to kind of pull together more financing and go to a producer who you might be curious about or a cinematographer who you might be curious about. And sometimes when we're looking for those collaborators, it's hard to, we're not going to get, for example, I remember working with somebody who loved Yorgos Lanthimos' films, and it was like, oh, I would love, who's his DP? It's like, obviously that DP's not doing shorts. But you can look to see who's assisting that DP, and that means that you can work with somebody who's aspiring to be a cinematographer who assisted the cinematographer who shot your favorite, so you want to think about how to use things like IMD in strategic ways so you can kind of collaborate with people who get it or who are being mentored by the people that you're inspired by, if that makes sense. So a lot of it is kind of like figuring out and being really aware about where you are in your process and know that's a little bit of a long game. And so it might take you 2 or 3 shorts to make that short that's, playing that massive film festival, but that's gonna be helpful because you'll have a better sense of your voice and you'll be more ready to make that one after that, which is what people are going to be asking you about in that space. So kind of taking the time and building that work.
I'll just briefly say, because you asked, do you need a producer? Sometimes I think you just need someone who might be a little more organized than you are, someone who might be a little bit better at spreadsheets than you are. I started the producing side of my career on a friend's short, and I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew I was more organized than her, so it really helped. So I think like you can even start there of like, who's my friend that like loves numbers, and like then you're building with someone. You're like building with a producer who wants to take a chance. Instead of, I think there is a model in which you can like go to a more experienced producer, but sometimes it's just about like finding the person who can like maybe do the thing that feels harder for you to do.
And also, yeah, producing for shorts is like, it's so much more line producing as opposed to necessarily like producing for features, which can be so many different things. But I feel like for shorts, you're really dealing with like day-to-day logistics. So if you have someone that you trust that you can work out logistics with, that's your producer. That's someone who you can really work with in this capacity. Yeah.
Thank you.
What's the difference between somebody that could secure, $1,000 for their short, and then somebody that could secure $25,000 for their short or something? Is it network, skill, portfolio? What's the difference there? Maybe a main one.
I mean, mostly I'd say it's access, right? And how do you gain access? So you'll find people, I'll run into so many folks who are, I don't know, they might work in tech and have access to money, and they might not know the first thing about telling a story. And so they'll make a $75,000 short that they're like, why isn't this getting into Berlin? And it's like, well, you haven't actually figured out how to do the thing, but you had access to the resources. Meanwhile, you meet so many folks who are really talented and ready to tell those stories, but can't quite find that financing. I wonder, yeah.
And I feel like with shorts, in terms of like finding financing for shorts, I feel like it's either like crowdfunding or it's grants. And I think in New York, there's a lot of great grants, like the program that Sean runs, UFO, which I made 2 shorts in. You get 10 grand for each short. There is also mentorship and support there. But that, I feel like it's applying to those kinds of grants and artist development programs. Those will be incredibly helpful, both in finding funding for your film, but also for the longevity of your film. Because lots of these artist development programs, like New Fest also has a lot of incredible artist development programs that I've been lucky to be a part of. They will help you get your film seen, and they will help you build relationships with festivals, with distributors later on. And yeah, the funding you get will be much more meaningful in some ways than you could do a lot with that 10 grand versus that 75 grand that doesn't have the same kind of network or the same kind of industry mentorship and support that some of these artist development programs will be able to provide.
Totally, and it's an industry that loves like third-party validation. A lot of people in the film industry don't want to be the first person to take a bet on a filmmaker or an idea. So, the artist development spaces, UFO is an organization that takes a bet on somebody when nobody else is in, and that then allows somebody else to be like, oh, they got UFO, so we'll also give money, right? But if you were just going at it alone, they have to be the ones to take a leap. And so a lot of times in the grant space and the nonprofit space, you'll find people who are willing to take that leap, and then that can help. It sort of flies to honey. That can then attract other people to get behind your film. And it can just elevate you as like an artist who's gonna make multiple works, knowing that the short film might be the calling card that you're making this time. I think we have time for maybe
We have,
two.
yeah, one more back here.
One more?
Yeah.
Great.
How you doing? Good afternoon. After the film is done, all the investors put their money, hard work, and sweat, tears into the film. What are some of the newer ways or better ways to turn a short into profitability? If you want to talk or elaborate about the business part and the finance part of the short filmmaking.
Yeah, what's the most profitable short
Profitable?
you've made? That's not laughing at your
Negative
question.
dollars.
It's us crying.
Yeah, I think like I have not taken investments for shorts because I do think turning a profit on a short is challenging, even if it does something like go to Sundance, for example. It is incredibly challenging for people to understand how it could translate to money. I think like I've seen filmmakers use like YouTube ad revenue, which is something. I think of course you need to be like really good at social media, but I'm not. So I don't necessarily like, my aims are not like to turn a profit in shorts, it's to play the long game of like, maybe eventually someone will pay me to direct. But yeah, I think with if you do have an investor that's like, I want to turn a profit, it might, yeah, I don't know how that's a hard conversation.
I don't know if I'd approach, because I mean, full transparency on just things that I've seen, so this isn't everything, but somebody might give you anywhere between $2,000 to $5,000 to distribute your short. And if you're really lucky and you get like a major streamer who aren't buying things anymore, they'll give you like $20,000, right? So when you think about how much it costs to make your film, it's likely costing, I mean, more than most of what so you're not ever really turning a profit. What you're doing is you're getting your work out there and taken seriously, and you're then leveraging that.
Yeah.
So I feel like you were gonna say something.
Well, I think we think about shorts a lot of times as like a gateway to features, and I don't think that's what they are exclusively, but I do think that is some of the ways that we're thinking about how we're investing our time in shorts in order to help us kind of take an idea to that feature stage. I have heard of times where sometimes investors that are interested in a feature script will give a little bit of money for you to make a short so that it can kind of be a proof of concept. And that, I think, is a way in which the short can directly benefit your career and your investors financially. But yeah, I do think there is a lot of value. And I think when you're looking at the feature stage and you're kind of developing features, people really do look to your shorts for your voice and also for credibility in some ways, and like how does this person carry a story? How do they tell a story? And it matters the collaborators that you're working with, and it does matter to some extent what festivals you played and such. But yeah, there's a lot of different ways that shorts can kind of be an investment, not exactly monetarily, but in other ways. Yeah.
If I can say one, maybe this is a final thing because I know we have to go, but you can make a short that is a proof of concept for a larger film. I would not call it that, and I wouldn't behold yourself to saying, well, that's a scene in my movie, or that's kind of, I would make a short for short's sake, and if that's an idea that you want to expand to a feature, do it, and let that short on its own legs, without it being connected to a larger thing, have its life. And the example that I would give is this feature that I just finished producing and we're editing now. We made it in 2018. It was a short. The filmmaker was lucky enough to get that film into Berlin, played Berlin. Then that filmmaker spent the better part of 3, 4, 5 years writing a feature screenplay. And then 2 or so years ago, started to got like a residency for that, or was part of a screenwriter's labs that attracted attention to the feature. And then 2 years ago, we brought together a producer's team and started saying, here's the feature script, it's in good shape. Here's the short, it played at this major top tier festival. So now we have all the formula elements or all the ingredients you would need to have confidence in a project. And do you actually like the project and want to make it? And from that point, it took us 2 years. That included like 8 months of trying to cast. And then when we got recognizable names in it, the financing showed up about a month and a half later. And then we made a movie. And so it's kind of like this, that is a pretty like well-trodden pathway to making a feature, but understand that that's a 7-year window. And so let the short just be the short, go to the party, have a great time, and be like, I did it. And then later, think about the other work, because it's gonna take a while. And with that, I want to thank Brit, and I want to thank Kevin for joining us.